Welcome to Beyond Turning Points podcast. I have a wonderful guest for you today. Her name's Ryan Olexson, and Ryan's in Texas. I'm in Sydney, Australia. And we first met when I was a guest on Ryan's podcast called Beyond 80%. Correct, Beyond 80%. And there's something that struck me about Ryan was her presence, her attention to detail, but there was also this sense of real depth. And so after the interview, we chatted, and I thought, oh, what a wonderful guest to share with you. So here we are. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Well, yeah, I think you just do it naturally. So no pressure. Uh, so, Ryan, you're in Texas, and how about normally we sort of go to the work that people do later, but why don't we start with the work that you do? So I've got here that you're a master's level counselling student, certified personal trainer, and mind body enthusiast when you blend science, philosophy, and lived experience to challenge assumptions about consciousness, healing, and what it means to live fully awake.
Yeah, it's quite a mouthful when you say it out loud like that, but I think that incorporates a lot of how I live my life and the work that I do. So like you said, I'm in my master's program, so I'm about a year off from getting licensed as a therapist. I also own a gym and I'm a personal trainer. So a lot of my working with clients is blending both of those two modalities together.
Mm, amazing! What a great blend to have, and the shall we say consciousness and healing in the body that's so intertwined.
Yeah, it's so intertwined and it actually shocks a lot of my clients when I first come to them and I'm like, okay, we're going to work out today, but we're also going to add in some breathing and we're going to talk about things going on in life. And I love seeing how surprised they are when they walk out and feel great about themselves, about their lives and the way that, they think about everything overall.
So if someone comes to you, and I've got the phrase written here that emotion based strength training. Well, what does that mean? What does the session look like? How is it emotion based?
Yeah, yeah. So this is a very unique program. And it really came from my observation of when I was personal training clients. I started to notice that when clients became more in tune with their body, which happens naturally when you're weight training or strength training, because you have to know how to lift a weight, how much power you need to lift a weight, how tired you are. So this natural connection started happening. And I thought to myself, well, emotion regulation is really tough for a lot of people. I mean, um, I'd be hard pressed to find someone that says they don't have trouble regulating their emotions on a day to day basis. So I came up with this by basically allowing people to be in the space of an emotion such as anger, joy, pain, sadness, and do it in an environment that's not directly triggering, which would be in the gym, strength training. So there is an amazing study that looked at where emotions are actually felt in the body, and it's across all cultures, across all countries, all different walks of people, lives, all of that. And basically, it was very similar. So, for instance, anger you feel in your chest. When you feel sadness, your muscles withdraw in every part of your limbs and legs. And I said, well, why not make a workout again in an environment that's not triggering to people? Make a workout that would work with that emotion so people could really feel what it is to move that energy out of their body. So what emotion-based strength training does is it gears workouts directly toward the emotion. So there will be an emotion such as joy. And the workout is geared to expand that energy because most of us like to feel joy. But for something like anger that we don't like to sit with, we actually can take that energy and transmute it and get it out of our bodies. So that's the idea behind it. And it's very similar to regular strength training that you would see in the gym, but it's more thoughtful in terms of learning to be in your body and sit with those emotions and be more comfortable in that space.
Hmm. I love the fusion of existing things and the insight that you have to meld them together.
Yeah, it comes from a lot of research actually from kinesiology and studying athletes. And there's a theory that athletes are really good at the sports that they do because they are very connected to their body, which is called interoception. So when your body and your mind are super connected, you're able to regulate and understand the signals that your body is giving you. So let's say most people can understand when you're hungry, your stomach will growl, you may get a little hangry. These are signals your body is saying, hey, it's time to eat. And that's the same thing for emotions. Emotions are one of our best compasses that we have as humans to understand what's going on internally. So when I did a lot of research around that, I was like, well, why are these athletes so good? They're so good at their sport because they're able to tell their signals internally and move in the direction that they need to during their sport. So a lot of these concepts are pulled from research on athletes and kinesiology overall.
And so that's what you studied at college?
Yep, yep. That's it was actually an assignment. We had to do a research paper, um, and I found this map of emotions that researchers were, like I mentioned before, you have emotions in your body and where they show up. And I was so intrigued by it, and it kind of became a rabbit hole from there. It's the best way to describe it, a rabbit hole.
Hmm. And at the same time, were you doing your own inquiry into emotions and how you managed emotions?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I was a college athlete, so working out, exercising has always been a huge part of my life. And definitely in hard moments in my life, my release was always exercise or something active. I'm a person that really has a hard time sitting still. Um, and my meditation is movement. And I would always say, is meditation, does it always need to be in a still, quiet place or can it be in motion? So that's something I kind of leaned back into. As I was doing this research and looking into this kind of stuff, is what if there's a way to meditate during these hard moments in life, but it's through movement for those of us who maybe don't really love yoga or love sitting in silence. So this was something that I've leaned into over the course of my whole life.
Hmm. Yeah, what comes to mind is some experience that I've had. So probably 2019, 2018, 2019, I would say. I went to India and I went to, so have you heard of Osho? He's
No.
like, some people, he, he came to notoriety in the States towards the end of the 70s, and he was known as Bhagwan. And so he actually in Oregon, he started a community in Oregon. And so he moved his people from India. So he had a big following in India, and he moved to Oregon to start a new city, which was meant to be a conscious creation, right? And on many levels it was. So I have friends that were in that city and part of the creating of the city. However, he he had somebody running the city for him. So basically, he
Mm.
retreated into meditation, and then there was somebody named Sheila who is very infamous these days, but she,
The Netflix
yeah,
documentary.
yeah, yeah, the
Yes.
Wild Country, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, So from my perspective, he has these phenomenal meditations and these phenomenal encyclopedias of work. Yeah. However, there was conflict with the US government, and it went awry very quickly, but also Sheila was doing things that shouldn't have been done. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and so very interesting, people with good intentions then go into survival mode and flip and whatever may be behind that. But he has this wonderful meditation process called dynamic meditation. And it's a meditative process, takes about an hour, but it's physically intense for about 30 minutes of that hour.
Mhm.
And so I had already done it here in Australia, but I was doing it in India too. And so one of the ashrams that he started, there's this gigantic on the outside black marble pyramid. It's huge. It like takes the room probably inside the pyramid. They probably could fit 1,000 people, maybe 1,500 people. And so you do this dynamic meditation. It's moving meditation in the inside this pyramid, and inside it's all white. So on the outside is black marble, but you walk
Oh,
into it and it's
wild.
all white. Yeah, phenomenal space. But that's a very, very powerful way of processing emotions in a physical form. But what
Yeah.
it uses repetitive motion. So there's 5 stages. One of the stages is these whoos. They call them whoos, right? And you're like, whoo, whoo. So your arms are up in the air, you're jumping up and down, and you do that for 10 minutes nonstop, and whilst making the sound whoo, and it's like to get to connect you with your base chakra. But also, since then, so this is what started 60s, 70s.
Mhm.
And then since then, right, there's all these research around the benefits of trampolining and the jumping up and down on your blood flow. And he knew these things already without the scientific research.
I find that there's this knowledge is not new. Like even, the research that I look into, if you go back into ancient cultures and what they practice, I mean, they all knew this stuff. So I kind of giggle to myself, like, oh, here we are. We think we're so smart, in Western society, but it's always been there. This knowledge has been around for thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would possibly say even billions or trillions of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
just, it is, right? Like the physical is so temporary, but the knowledge and the awareness and the consciousness, it's always been.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. I watched this great video this morning, and it was a guy on TikTok talking about frequencies, but he was showing, how you'll see the geometric patterns of frequencies in water and things like that. So he was showing that, but then he correlated that to one of the Incan pyramids. And he said, this is an exact visual representation of the frequency pattern in the water. Right. And it was a perfect overlay. Phenomenal, one of those step pyramids. And
Yeah.
even the patterns at the base of the pyramids, they matched the variations in the frequencies. It was extraordinary. Like the knowledge and wisdom and technology to be able to see that, identify that, communicate that. Phenomenal.
I know. I this is one thing that I frequently sit here and I'm like, I just want to know everything about the whole world and history. I mean, speaking of architecture, I think back to architecture long ago, even up until like the 1800s and how beautiful and eccentric it was. It was so detailed. And even now when you walk around and you see buildings, we've lost a lot of that attention to detail when it comes to buildings. I mean, you can't find cathedrals like you could back in the day. And, our buildings now are so square and there's nothing special about them. So even when it comes down to, thinking about how much we've lost in terms of knowledge, it still shocks me.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I saw something recently around the resonance of round buildings versus square buildings,
Mm,
and that, you know, our bodies respond to sound, and they respond to resonance, and being in a square room changes the resonance so much.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And speaking of resonance and change, at some point in your life, there was a turning point. Do you have something in mind?
Yeah, yeah. I have a couple, but the one we'll start with, I think the earliest one that really threw me for a loop was when I was a junior in college. I had my daughter, and that was very unexpected. I had mentioned before I was a college athlete and I had a scholarship. And having a baby at 21 was definitely not part of my plan. Um, so that was definitely a huge turning point that changed my life.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious if it's okay. It was like what was that young version of you thinking when she got pregnant and was thinking about life moving forward? Was it positive, catastrophizing? What was her perception of what was going to happen and what was happening to her life?
Oh yeah, it was so to paint a little bit of a picture beforehand, I was the oldest child of 3 girls, so I definitely carried that burden that older child carry where they have to be perfect, they have to do everything right, they have to please their parents. So, I had this persona about myself that I was gonna be successful and do everything the right way, it was gonna be in order, I was gonna go to college, get a job, get married, and then have kids. So this came well before that. So when I found out I was pregnant, I would say I felt so much shame. It was the shame of not living up to what I was supposed to live up to, what everyone wanted me to live up to. Um, and there was a belief in my head that if you had gotten pregnant outside of a marriage and you were pregnant that young, that you were doomed to be a single mother and all these things that I had no idea about in the world because my world was so small. So it was not a positive one in the least. I was very, very lucky though that I had great parents that were very understanding and they did not react the way that I thought they would about it. And they were a huge help to me and my husband. He was then my boyfriend. But they helped us out a lot early on because it's not the coolest thing to be in college and have a baby. It kind of puts a damper on the social life. So they were just fabulous in helping us get to be in our early 20s still, but also, being and learning how to be parents together. And also helping my husband and I's relationship grow, which was all integral parts of who honestly I am today. Um, and yeah, it ended up, it was very quickly ended up being an exciting, amazing thing that happened to me. But yeah, at first it was definitely scary.
Mm. And you have 3 kids now?
Now I have 3 kids. Yep.
Mhm.
So my oldest is 15. I have a daughter that's 10, and then I have a son that is 4.
Uh, busy times.
Yes, it's funny, we're kind of all over the spectrum. The dinner table conversation is always my favorite because, the 15-year-old comes with her teenage drama and, so and so said this and so did that. And then you have my 10-year-old who's really into Taylor Swift and, she's in her like celebrity awe stage. So she's always talking about the latest trends and what's cool. And then we have my 4-year-old who is, like, fascinated with dinosaurs. So our dinner conversation is quite eclectic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Um, yeah, picturing a beautiful family. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so coming out of college, you were just I shouldn't take out the word just. You were a full-time mum. Yeah, is that right?
Oh,
Or
no,
you
no,
worked? No?
no, no, that's if I would love to just be a mom, but my brain is a little bit to all over the place to just do that. So I came out of college. I worked in marketing. I worked in the corporate world for about 10 years. Um, and we moved around a little bit. So we started in New Jersey. That's where I'm originally from. We moved to Arizona and then we got to Texas. Um, but yeah, I worked up into the corporate world till about 3 years ago. Um, that's when I had another turning point. So yeah.
Uh-huh. And were you happy working corporate world?
I Yes and no. It definitely fed my need for creativity. I worked in marketing. So it fed my need for that creativity outlet, but it was not conducive to the routines and just the lifestyle that I wanted.
Mm, mm,
I think I mentioned before I have a hard time sitting. So,
mhm.
9 to 5 in a chair with a desk was always a challenge.
Yeah. It makes sense too that you run your own business. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
imagine there's individuality kind of is important, and self self guiding yourself and following what you want would be important. I imagine as someone having your own business.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and it's funny, I've always been told by others I should run my own business, and I it just was never a belief I could accept about myself that I could do that, and run a business and I had this image of what a business owner was, and that definitely stopped me for quite a long time.
Mm. Interesting how those images we have of what should be stop us. Well, they don't
Mhm.
stop us, but the illusion of those that hold us back.
Yeah, and half the time it's not even ours. It's somebody else's that we've accepted.
Mm, yeah. Mhm. And so, do you want to share how you came to leave corporate world?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like everyone says this, but it definitely started during COVID. I was home a lot more. Everybody was home, the whole family was home. I was working nonstop, because there's only so much walking you can do around the house versus in the office where you can, bounce around, but it it kind of all built up, I think, and this was before I was aware of really any internal emotions happening within myself. I would call myself a classic distractor. So if I felt something that I didn't really like, I just distract myself with something else. Um, and I think that all piled up. And for me, it came to a head when I was pregnant with my 3rd child. Um, I wanna call it like a tsunami of emotions, just, hormones, throw those in there, and then all that built up. It kinda just came to a head for me. And shortly after I had my 3rd child, I went into horrible postpartum depression, um, and that got me to seek out a what I assumed you do when you have postpartum or you have something going on emotionally, which was a psychiatrist to get on the right medication. And so I was taking medication, I was going to therapy, and just nothing was really working for me. So I went a very unconventional route. Started to do a lot of research around alternative therapies I could do, and that's when plant medicine popped up. Um, and before that, I had never taken any drug in my life, nothing. I mean, I was a drinker, but that was about all I ever did. So it was a very scary route for me, but I was very desperate and I wanted to get off medication because it wasn't fixing anything for me. So I sat in my first plant medicine ceremony, and coming out of that was a huge shift, and it woke me up to the fact that I was living a life that I didn't necessarily choose in terms of, the career I wanted, the person I wanted to be, the lifestyle I wanted, And so that was a huge turning point for me after that.
Are you okay if we go into the ceremony a little
Yeah,
bit and the process of that?
let's go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, which plant were you sitting with?
Yeah, so I sat with ayahuasca. Um, and I always like to preface this conversation that I it is really important that you do your research on who you sit with when you do ayahuasca because it is a very potent psychedelic. But I found this woman through a series of inquiries and research that I did, and she was willing to do a private ceremony because I was so scared. So I flew to her. My husband came with me, and we had a private ceremony with this shaman. Um, yeah, I'll pause there for a second, and you can let me know what parts of the ceremony you want to know about.
Yeah, yeah. And so your husband sat as well with the medicine?
Yes, he is like the definition of a ride or die kinda guy. I mean,
Mhm.
he has been with me every step of the way, especially during this time, because I could just not figure out what was happening with me and what was going on internally. Um, and he's a very risk adverse person. So for him, this was probably a much bigger deal than it was for me. But he was like, if you're going to do it, I'm going to do it with you. And that helped ease a lot of the fear.
Yeah. How wonderful to find him so young.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's been a very fun journey with my husband.
Oh. Mm. And so during the ceremony, I'm curious, was there a moment of realization what was happening, like energetically, or what you were aware of in that moment of realization?
Yeah, it brought up a lot of uh me as a child, that version of myself. Um It taught me that where my perfectionism, my need for perfection or living up to this standard that I thought people had of me kinda came from. It stemmed a lot of, from my childhood, like I said. Energetically, I was able to see if I kept going on the path that I was going on, it would and I'm trying to find the words. Even after all this time, I still struggle to find the words to explain it, but it showed me that I was growing a sense of death inside of myself. That sounds so dramatic, but
Right.
I felt this sense of death coming over. Like I wasn't actually living. And it showed me all of these moments where I wanted to do something, but it didn't add up to the role that I saw that I wanted to be seen as. Um, and one of the coolest parts of it is it brought up something from when I was about 6 or 7. And I was a very imaginative type of child. I would play with these Barbies for hours and create these scenes and play out these movies. And it was asking me like, where did that go? Like, why did you why did you push that aside? That's one of your greatest gifts and talents. Um, so that really stuck with me after that was, I'm not really living. I'm living for this version of myself that doesn't fit who I am. And I think I walked out of there and I decided in that moment I want to be, I want to grab that child part of me back and bring it back in and take the journey to get back to that person.
Mm. And was that easy? Like coming out and going, okay, here's this realization. I want to get back to that child. Not alive. I haven't been living my life, all right, in alignment with me. And so was that just like, okay, and now I do it, or there was a process required to think I'm possibly still ongoing?
God, I wish it was just like a snap of the fingers. Wouldn't that be nice? No, it was probably it's I'm still on this journey and it was very difficult. Um integrating after a ceremony, I didn't realize at the time is where all the work happens. It's not the ceremony that's the hardest, it's the part after. Um, After that, I think I kinda chalked it up to like, "Okay, I'm healed now, we're good, we can carry on." And, that feeling of I'm not living up to who I wanna be, I don't things just got worse in a sense. It started to kinda crash around down around me, and here I was trying to run and hold up all these buildings in terms of, my job and the friends that I had and, this keeping quiet when people said something I didn't agree with, and there was all these things happening at once. Um, and I started to have I would call it a panic attack, I guess. It was a panic attack, and I realized, like, I can't carry on with the job that I have. I loved where I worked. It's a great company. It made no sense. I was making, 6 figures. I was doing well. I was successful in all the check mark boxes, but it just it didn't sit right. And it was almost like that ceremony allowed me to peek behind the curtain of what life was really about and what this world really is. Um, and I started to just get so curious about so much that happened in that ceremony. And basically I decided, like I have to step away from this. I have to step away from the job. I need to just take a little hiatus and figure out how I want to show up authentically, like who I even am authentically. And that's what I did.
Mm. And if I ask you a question, just you can feel free to just what comes to mind. What did you discover is about what did you discover about living authentically?
Living authentically. That's such a good question. It was it was going back to the interests and the I used to call them just like hobbies that I would do. It was You know, I always was a writer. I love producing different shows and I used to write comedy blogs. I used to do stand-up comedy. I had all these interests on the side that were always like hobbies to me. So I kept them very separate from who I was. I would never bring the stand-up comic into corporate life and I would never bring my writing into my corporate life. Um and living authentically was taking those things that I loved so much and blending them together. That was one aspect. And realizing that they could all be potential careers for me. They could all be avenues for me to continue and develop and explore. I think the way that I was living within my family and the lifestyle that we wanted within our family felt always just not normal, and I mean that in a sense where, I came from a very city life background, but I moved to the country, and I had horses, and I'd never saw that that was ever possible for me to, like, raise a family and have a career and live that life as well. So my dreams were huge, and I realized living authentically was incorporating those into my life and not keeping them as just dreams, like actually implementing them or embodying that.
So when did you get the insight around the strength training and the emotional aspect of that?
Yeah. Well, I was unemployed at this time and I was like, well, I'll go back and do what I know how to do, which is work out and train. And so I got my personal training certification and I started working at a gym. Very quickly, I realized that when I was training clients who I would see 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more than an actual therapist would see them, they started opening up, and I realized there was a connection there. Um, so, these people would work out, but they would talk about their lives. And like I mentioned before, I started to see this connection of the more they became aware of their body sensations, the more they were, speaking up in their daily lives. They were able to name emotions that they were feeling. They were able to regulate themselves by things that they were learning in the gym. And that got me interested in the therapy track. And not that I necessarily wanted to become a therapist, but I've always been interested in psychology. And at the time, that was the route that I thought made the most sense. Um, so I didn't even hesitate. I threw myself back into school, and yeah, it was beautiful and strange and ironic how it all came together, but it was me taking that initial jump off leaving my job and departing from this version of myself that I didn't really connect with, to actually find more alignment in who I am authentically.
Mhm. And how is it to live life now with that alignment and that authenticity?
I mean, it's way better. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? Like, we all have our days, but um it's great because now my hard is, when I have something hard, it's like I choose the hard. My hard days are 1,000 times better than the days when I was working in my corporate job and I wasn't speaking up and being myself. Um So it's still busy. It's still, I still have those down days, and I'm actively trying to work on my own emotional regulation. But it's nice because things feel more attainable for me. When I want something, I run out and get it. It's more exciting. I've started to see the magic in the world overall, and that's what's so fun about where I am now. I have multiple things going, but I'm excited to see where they all go and end up. And at the end of the day, I learned something from it, so I don't see it as a waste anymore. It's just every day is exciting to see where it's going to bring me.
Yeah. My experience living from the heart, and of course, it's a practice, not a perfection. Yeah,
Yeah.
I still get annoyed, and I still have my moments
Yep.
of what I would judge myself for. But it's like, okay, the for me pre near death experience, the perception was that it was harder to live from the heart,
Hmm.
whereas now, it's not easy. But what's harder, living from the heart or not living from the heart? And for me, living from the heart, it's the practice of actually trusting something else other than the mind.
Yep.
And for me, that can be the divine, that can be my own guidance, my own sense of what is right for me. And of course, the mind will come in and be like, no, 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 you have obligations to other people. And that was something that was a big piece for me to navigate, was the sense of obligation for others, to others. And that took a long time. It can still come up, of course. I often say it's a bit, I still have this accent, right? I still have these human personality structures that won't go away. It's part of the hard wiring as we grow. But yeah, so your experience from living from the heart, which is how I would describe it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you, like, summed it up perfectly. It was like, before, you're right, it's living from the mind and listening to all of those little voices, and again, some of those voices are not even they weren't even mine. And, you're taught from early on, you can't just live by your gut feelings. You're taught to kind of shove that down. That doesn't, that's not logical. And now, living from the heart, I I love that because it's never steered me wrong. I've been in this journey for 4 years now, and in 4 years, it's never steered me wrong.
hmm, yeah, amazing, amazing. And what about depression? So you did the ceremony and then you came out. What happened with your depression?
Yeah, it was still definitely a process. It was still a battle. It got a lot better. I went off medication entirely. Um, so I definitely accomplished what I set out to do in that regard. I did end up doing a couple of more other plant ceremonies, and it only, deepened that journey and that connection with myself. But the depression, I mean, that's it's never been at that level since then.
Mm. For me, because I had a pretty dark depression for 8 or 9 years, the peace that I discovered when I wasn't depressed anymore, and then I had this time of the feeling like the depression came back, and it was only for a week, right? But I kept thinking, oh, I feel depressed. This is what depressed feels like. And then through my own inquiry, I got to this point where, ah, my depression was self-judgment and self-loathing. It was that in Buddhist terms, the second arrow, right? The first
Mhm.
arrow is the pain of the event. The second arrow is the pain of self-judgment for responding in a certain way or not handling things better. And that was my depression, right? Like I had traumatic things happen, but my depression was that I was not being in a way that my mind perceived I should be.
Yeah.
And so when I had that week where I was judging myself, the realization, wow, that's how hard my self-judgment was that it put me in a hole for 6 or 7 years of really deep black depression. Did you
Yeah.
have any sort of insight around your depression, or was it chemical? What are your thoughts?
I still struggle to this day to truly understand the the root of it and the cause, and I think through the work that I've done, I I was fighting certain emotions so much. I'm usually a very high anxiety person, so the depression really threw me off because, I'm usually a up on the high, not on the low. I do think it was just this accumulation of years of just kind of holding things in and not addressing it. And I will say one of the best insights, and I read it somewhere, and I wish I remember where I read it, but I started to essentially it was that emotions are a way to tell you where to go and what to look at, what needs to be addressed, what your subconscious is ready to bring to the forefront of your brain and actually address. And so instead of looking at emotions as a pain in the ass and let's get out of here and I don't want to deal with this, I started to ask myself questions about, okay, what's going on? Why are we feeling low today? Why are we feeling anxiety today? And that series of questions, just like when I was in ceremony, you'd ask a question and you just get the answer. That was one of the coolest parts of the ceremony that I remember. And I started practicing that in my day to day life. And when I started to do that, I started to look at my emotions as a roadmap and following the roadmap and got me into places that I realized like, oh, I was really bothered because, so and so said this to me and I just let it go and I internalized that instead of, you know, maybe asking a question or trying to understand that person. Why did they say that? Why did they think that? Um so I would say that was my biggest insight was just kind of looking at my emotions as a roadmap and a compass instead of like this burden that I had to just kind of figure out a way to get rid of.
Mm. Yeah, so before that, it was like, okay, I have this emotion, need to get rid of it. Whereas now it's like, okay, there's a roadmap, there's an exploration here for me to discover something.
Yeah, like what do we need to know about this? What information should I know right now about what I'm feeling? Um and that was really helpful to kind of reframe the way that I even saw these things that were popping up in my body, right? It was more of a friend than an enemy. And I think that really shifted the way that I was able to just look at life in general.
Mm. I imagine those insights and those challenges, they're just treasure beyond measure. Not intentionally rhyming, right? But treasure beyond measure for your clients.
Yeah, yeah, I think it can take a little while to, someone like me, if I was counseling myself, I would hear something like that before and I'd be like, "Girl, you're insane. What are you talking about?" But I think when people can practice asking themselves question and trusting the answer that comes to them, because I'm a believer that you have all the answers, all the questions you ever want to know. And so when I'm counseling my clients, I'll say to them, like, ask the question. What do you need to know right now? What does your body need to tell you? What information do you need? And I see when they're able to kind of practice these insights, you know, over time they start to trust themselves more, which can be a whole insight in itself.
Mhm. Yeah. What beautiful work you're doing.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I'm lucky that I listened to myself and found this work, because it brings so much joy to me.
Mm. And what's the impact on your family with you being in that joy and following your heart?
Oh man, I'm sure they'll say something different. But they I notice a very peaceful household. And one of the things that I love about this work and how it's translated to my family is, me and my husband are on very similar journeys. So he's opened himself up to exploring different things in his past and his childhood. Same with me. And I love that, our family looks very different from the families that we came from in good ways. And when they talk about breaking generational cycles and not repeating patterns, when you're aware of these patterns, you realize the burden that you take off your children to fix that down the line, right? I'm a believer in, if you don't fix your shit, your kids are going to have to fix it. So I love that we've both been able to kind of address some of this stuff and hopefully don't pass on these cycles and these bad habits that we have individually to our children.
Mhm.
They'll just be in therapy complaining about other stuff now, but at least it won't be the stuff that we'd had to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then that's right. That's part of life, right? No
Yeah,
matter,
yeah.
there's always something that's going to challenge us or something that we're going to suppress ourselves as we're growing and emerging, and
Mhm.
then have to become aware of that and process that. And then, of course, the gift is that we have that awareness, and at times there'll be others that will benefit from that experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm, mm. And so you're following the heart, which is stepping into the unknown, right? Like, and the heart is very uncomfortable. I mean, very comfortable in the unknown.
Mhm.
Like, it's expansive and it's wise and it's supportive. And the mind, of course, is opposite to that, right? It wants to contract. It wants to live from the past because its rules come from the past. And then you decide to start a podcast.
Yeah, yeah, that podcast, man, it's such a love-hate relationship. I'm sure you can relate because, it is so much fun to have a podcast, but it's a lot of work and energy, but when you see that final product, it's like, "Oh, that was worth it. That was worth it." Yeah, so the podcast it's such a weird story, but I feel like it's relevant, so I'll go into it. I was training an individual and he was regaining his ability to walk again, and he was a military guy, very active. So this was hard for him to work with me, especially a female, on getting him stronger and you know getting that ability to walk again. So him and I became very close, and he would he would say these comments during session, and he would leave and I would sit there and be like, "Huh, how did he know that?" And I started putting more of these comments together, and it was like something I thought about early that morning that he would never know about, and he would make a comment about it. And And so finally one day I said, what's your deal? Are you psychic? Are you like what's going on? And he kind of laughed and he was like, "Yeah, I am. I am." So long story short, I was like, "Well, I want to get a reading with you." And he was very shy about his abilities. But he was like, "Fine, I'll give you a reading." So he gave me a reading, and one of the things he said to me, he said, "You love to talk and you love to meet people." And he just kept saying, "You just love to talk." He's like, "You need to start a podcast." And it was like the first time I had thought about it, and I was like, "Yeah, it's something that I would be into." So I sat on it for about a year after that reading. And it came to me one day. I was actually hiking in Sequoia National Park, and there's not much to do but besides hike and think. So it kind of came to me that I was like, I have so many questions about so many different areas in life, and I couldn't like get myself to land on one specific topic for a podcast. But I was like, well, what if I just make a podcast about that? Just kind of exploring the different perspectives of life. And a lot of that came to down to my own limiting beliefs that I had, right? I think all of us have these limiting beliefs that we hold on to, and then it shapes our life. And I don't even think we realize it. And so I wanted to start a podcast that challenged beliefs that people have about certain topics, or just learn about new things and get really curious about it. And so that was the basis of the podcast Beyond 80%. And so the whole theme of it is you question, you think about it, and then you evolve or you grow. So I love to have on guests and explore different topics that really challenge people to question their own limiting beliefs and just the way that they think about the world in general.
Hmm. Beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I ended up on your podcast because you were doing a series which you're going to release soon on near death experience. Um, and something I saw in you was your attention to detail, and also that you weren't just recording a conversation, releasing conversation, that your podcasts are cultivated. Like it's like a work of art that you're cultivating. And so you've interviewed different people with different perspectives and about near death experiences. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, yeah. It's man, I'm so excited for this series. It's it's actually an exploration of consciousness overall. What is it? Does it survive after death? And it's through the lens of near death experiences. So I really wanted consciousness is something that has fascinated me for ever. Um, and, the more I looked into near death experiences and also the similarities it has to these psychedelic states that people talk about. I mean, even my own experience feels very similar to things I hear those who have experienced near death. Um, it's just, it has me so curious and captivated. And so this series interviews neuroscientists. We have a neurosurgeon, researchers, experiencers themselves. We have a death doula that talks about the history and the culture of death. And all of these episodes are to really get people to think, what happens after you die? And what does that mean about how you live today? So it's not necessarily to convince anyone that near death experiences are these other realms, or there is an afterlife or anything like that, but more propose the question so that people start thinking about that. Because I think if we can explore consciousness and even just ask all the questions that exist around it, it does change the way that you see your own life and how you live every day.
Yeah, I agree totally on that one. Yeah, the life is very precious and very short, and coming out of my near death experience, that well, why wasn't I living life to the full potential? What was that? And the question, what is consciousness? I just experienced some strange, out of my previous experience level of consciousness. What is that? So that too led me to explore plant medicines as well, because I was like, well, I guess plant medicines are an exploration of consciousness. Oh, maybe I'll have a little dabble in that and see, because I was just so curious. What is consciousness? Mm. Now in daily life, that consciousness and expansion and things like that, it occurs so much more, and it's from that practice of living from the heart and being present, and there's many times a day I'm not present. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that the actually benefits of being present and expansive, and it's not something that I would have comprehended before, because I didn't know what it meant to be expansive. I remember the first time. Actually, what had happened was I just played around with taking some mushrooms, and I had a pre-near death experience. I'm very anti any of those kinds of things, but it just planted the question, right? And of course, our questions, we want them answered, so it drives our
Yeah.
behaviors, right? So I wanted to experience consciousness, and I took some mushrooms, and I experienced the expansion. And then a few days later, I remember I was at work and I was looking at the clouds, and I felt the expansion. And so it was like the mushrooms taught me this is what it feels like to be expansive. And so from there, I'm like, oh, okay, I just expanded in my experience of looking at the clouds. So that led down a different pathway. And now I don't need mushrooms or anything like that to be
Yeah.
expansive and experience that. But it just opened up that doorway to realize what that experience was. So then I could identify it and soften, always softening in life. It's like, okay, softening into that experience.
I think
Mm.
that's such a good point, and when I try and explain plant medicine and the point of it and just things you take out of ceremony, because I think it's very easy to get stuck in the cycle of doing ceremony after ceremony after ceremony and not implementing the things in ceremony into your daily life, right? And that's hard. But you nailed it by saying you were given the awareness of it, and then you were able to mimic that in your day-to-day life. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about it, is just like, this is possible. Like, I can expand. I can see this in my day-to-day. And then I just think that's the best part of it, is to learn how to embody that when you come back into your, well, real life, whatever we want to call it, right? Your reality now.
Mhm. Yeah, and Ryan, I want to thank you for sharing your embodiment of that on the podcast.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
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 It's yeah, acknowledging you for how you're living and the choices you've made, and that you are someone that's been through a turning point and then is living differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is called beyond turning points, because it's not the turning point; it's what you do after that makes the difference, right? Everybody has turning points, but not everybody navigates them well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
acknowledging you for those choices that you're making, and how wonderful to share a conversation with you again. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I will I will put contact details for you if anyone wants to get in touch with you. I'll put them in the show notes.
Awesome.
Do you do social media or anything like that?
Yeah, I do social media. I have an Instagram for my podcast, Beyond 80 Podcast on
Mm,
Instagram.
great. I'll put a link for that as well.
Awesome.
Um, I don't think I follow you. I don't.
It's a very
Well,
small
that's going to
following.
change. That's going to
Yeah.
change. Well, you don't need a big following. Don't need a big following. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And it's going into evening for you in Texas. So,
Yeah, Ash, thank you so much. This was great. I'm so honored to be on your podcast. I love it. I love the concept of it. So this was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And that client of yours was right. A superb speaker, like very eloquent, communicate beautifully, and yeah, I'm really curious to see where life leads for you next. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.